when we build our offerings, we're not trying to provide access to healthcare actually anymore. Like that's not enough. We want to provide access to a better health outcome.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Steve Gutentag, co-founder and CEO of 30 Madison, a human-centered healthcare company. In this episode, we discuss the company's recent $140 million funding round, its merger with women's healthcare company Nurx, and Steve shares his plan for becoming the leading platform for specialty healthcare offerings. Let's get into it. Hi, Steve. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Looking forward to the conversation here today. And maybe just to kick things off, can you introduce yourself and tell us about 30 Madison?
Sure. So I'm Steve Gutentag. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of 30 Madison. We're a healthcare company that is just hit its 5th birthday actually yesterday since we started 30 Madison. And we're focused on becoming the premier healthcare company for people living with chronic conditions. And so many people know us by some of our offerings that are consumer facing, like Keeps for hair loss, Code for migraine, and others. But really what we've built is a new and innovative care model that delivers better patient experiences and superior health outcomes at scale. And we do that through these specialist level offerings and a singular platform and infrastructure.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting and to have both followed the company in the space and then, of course, kind of digging in preparation for this company. You talk about it as a human first or human-centered healthcare company. Can you just kind of expand on that, what you mean by that and what it actually looks like in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think if you talk to the average person who has a healthcare experience with the traditional system, usually the word enjoyable is not how it's described. And being built around the patient, people say patient-centered all the time. But at the end of the day, the experience itself often is lacking. And so we got our roots in building experiences for patients directly. We went with our Keeps offering and our Cove offering. And, we say that we are building the premier healthcare company for people living with chronic conditions. And one of the biggest and most important words there is people. That is our North Star, the people who are suffering from different health issues or who have specific chronic needs that they're not able to satisfy elsewhere. And when we are serving those people as our North Star, it brings a lot of clarity as to how do we make sure that what we're building is built for them at the center. And, we work with so many other constituents and stakeholders within the healthcare industry, providers, payers, pharma companies, you name it. But what I think is so special is that we work with them to bring them into this model to better serve patients and in service of patients and in service of those people. And so everything that we do, we start with this first principle of how do we create a better patient experience, an incredible, enjoyable patient experience that's really delightful. And we build an entire brand ecosystem around that, the set of chronic conditions and the set of health issues that that patient is really trying to address. And we really think about it from that principled consumer-centric approach. But then we apply that and marry that with our outcome-centric patient model that is really designed to help support a patient from start to ongoing care and from a lens of what does the patient need to get to the best health outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really important. I definitely want to dig in a little bit more to, how you approach the different kind of conditions that you are tackling and then expand those over time. But I was just curious in terms of, structure. We've seen a lot of different companies emerging in the kind of digital health, direct to consumer healthcare that are, a venture studio, some are holding companies, some are, launching the companies and spinning them out. What is the structure of 30 Madison and how did you arrive at that?
I think a lot of people assume that we have different companies and we're kind of either a studio or we spin out these independent brands and that's not actually what it is. So the brand is part of that model that I said that was this really human-centered, built for the patient the person who has chronic conditions. And so we marry that brand with our longitudinal or care, our patient journey that I talked about. So the company is one company, and the way we're able to deliver our model to patients at scale is we've built a central platform and infrastructure that spans technology and data, spans medical services and operations, and it spans physical infrastructure and supply chain capabilities. And this platform is what powers that care model, and it's not specific to any one chronic condition, but it's all the pieces that think about this as APIs or software that a patient will complete their consultation with, or a physician will use to see a patient, or the actual physician group and the network of physicians and the care team that supports them, or the pharmacy that supports all of our offerings. And then we build these dedicated brands and experiences on top of this platform, targeting specific chronic conditions. And so they're all interconnected. They're all designed to be essentially think of it like a virtual center of excellence, like a virtual specialist practice around that set of health issues, but with the scale and infrastructure behind it of our platform and the ability to serve patients across a variety of chronic conditions as a result of that.
Yeah, for sure. I think, basically improving all of the, not only experience, but like you said, the infrastructure is central to and key both to improving the consumer experience, but also the healthcare system, which in and of itself is broken on different levels. So it makes sense that you would approach it that way. You mentioned some of the conditions and brands from Keeps to Cove, I think Even and Picnic, other ones covering everything from kind of the hair loss, migraines, GI issues, allergies. Can you talk about the vision and go to market in terms of how you approach which conditions you are serving, how you spin up those brands, and ultimately get them launched in this platform?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So first and foremost, when we think about, I think it's helpful to understand how do we get here, and then a little bit about where are we going. So we started with Keeps, which is focused on men's hair loss. And the reason being is we're building a platform, we're building our infrastructure, all those pieces that I talked about just a second ago. But at our core, what we said we're building is this care model, and the platform serves that, it powers that. And what's so special about the care model is that it's not built for a specific chronic condition. It is built for better serving patients across so many types of chronic conditions. It's really designed to work for almost any chronic condition over time. And that's a pretty tall statement, right? And we had to prove that out. And so we said, well, let's start with something on the lighter side of healthcare, more low acuity, less complex health issue. And hair loss was a really good chronic condition for us to get started in. And so that was the first application of our care model, where we built this dedicated brand, this dedicated experience, and then we invested in specialist level telemedicine, personalizing treatment options, ongoing condition management and care for patients, all through Keeps. And so we started there, and we saw really great success. We saw that we were both delivering on that promise of a better patient experience. Patients loved us. We were growing, and we're still growing very, very quickly. But we were also delivering on that promise of actually helping guys keep their hair, and we were driving to really good health outcomes and making them really happy. And so as we saw success, we said, great, first proof point. So now we want to think about what was the next one. And we could have said, okay, we're seeing really great success with Keeps. Let's do another condition like Keeps, or let's focus on another area like that and just keep growing that way. But again, with our core being our care model, and our promise being that we can serve a whole host of chronic conditions, we said we needed to go with something much more serious, and pick a much higher acuity, more complex condition where we can still serve patients, where we can still build that dedicated experience. And so we went and selected migraine as that second condition. And we built this Cove brand. It's a very different patient. We had to go and really understand what is their core need? What's the challenges that they're facing? And we had to approach building it differently, because not only is migraine a much more complex condition than men's hair loss, but the spectrum of care required for migraine is also very different. So whereas hair loss, our average guy typically is not using treatments today, like we're introducing them and helping them keep their hair, stop hair loss for the first time. Our migraine patient is very different. The vast majority are women. But more importantly than their gender is the fact of they're severe migraine sufferers. So they are on average coming in with 9 or more migraine per month. Most of them have seen a physician before. Most of them have suffered for many years. And a third of them before coming to Cove have gone in the months preceding either to urgent care and a quarter to the ER just for their migraine. So they're deeply suffering. And we really had to build our model to serve this much higher acuity, much more complex patient population and ensure that the model worked there. And we've been really fortunate over the last couple of years to demonstrate and prove out that our model works for a really low acuity health issue, a really high acuity health issue, and it works at scale. We're the largest provider of migraine care in the country. We're the largest hair loss business as well. Like, we have built real scale in these areas, serving hundreds of thousands of patients actively, like on an ongoing basis. And so we saw those kind of not at bookends, but we saw those on very different ends of that spectrum. And so we started to build into our next set of conditions with GI and allergy being focused and having that, continuing to build out both capabilities at our core platform with very specific use cases for those chronic conditions. And as we think about the strategy going forward, our ambition is not to just have one or two or low to high, but one, whenever we enter into a condition area, we want to be able to serve the full spectrum of those patients. So from the first line treatment to some of the more serious therapies and helping patients get to a better outcome regardless of where they are in their journey. Two, we want to go for broad breadth. So we want to have at least one offering relevant for every person in our country in the next few years. So we are not trying to just bring a patient in and figure out, okay, well, like, is the only way this works is by like continuing to serve you here, or we have to go and serve you elsewhere. But really, we want to be the best place for a host of conditions, and at least one of them be relevant for everyone in the country.
Yeah, I think that's really, really powerful. And I think seeing that expand over time, I'd be curious to know, as you're going through this process, have there been any conditions, brands that you've gone down the path of starting to launch, but hasn't worked for one reason or another? Or have you not encountered that as much thus far?
We have been really, we've only launched, we've started to work on, only launched 4 to date, right? They're out in the market, all 4 are there. We've seen all 4 of them have success, which is fantastic, but it hasn't always been right out of the gate. We've had to learn and adapt and iterate and evolve as we've done that. When we first launched our Evens offering, we really launched it with this one narrow focus of acid reflux GERD. And as we started to do that, we weren't meeting the needs of patients. And what we realized was we were seeing incredible demand and interest, but we weren't able to actually serve the patient, because they often, acid reflux or GERD was just one of the symptoms of a broader GI issue, or vice versa. They've had multiple GI issues. And so we've had to step back and we started to expand and really see ourselves less about one condition within GI, but a set of interrelated GI conditions as a starting point. And so we had to learn that, we think of ourselves as building these specialist level offerings. Like, we want to be the center of excellence for these different areas where we operate in. And we started with one condition per brand. And that's, Keeps just was men's hair loss. Cove was just migraine. So Evens was just acid reflux and GERD. And we realized that it sometimes is, we want to be more of a GI specialist. So that means we're not going so broad, but we got to go a little bit broader than one condition to serve the patient properly. And so we started to add IBS and other conditions alongside that were interrelated, so that we were more holistically acting as a specialist for that area.
Yeah, it makes sense that it's kind of you're evolving that offering as you get more and more feedback and engage with more customers, patients, to make sure that you are serving them, to your point. The other thing is, you're explaining both the platform and the structure that comes to mind is, how are how are you structuring and how are you kind of setting up the teams to be both interconnected but be able to work independently to serve the different kind of brands? So you have that central tie-in right with the infrastructure, but these teams have to be able to kind of be self-sustaining on their own. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
We're about 350-ish people today overall, working across all of our offerings, as well as all the central pieces. And I think it's important to note that when you're growing really quickly, it's not static, right? The structure and how we operate is not static. We're 350 people, today, maybe a little over 300 when we started 2022. We were like just over 100 people when we started 2021. And we were 50 when the pandemic started. And so the structure and the team has had to evolve, not only as our business has changed and grown, but also the team has. And so I'll tell you what we look like today. But the reality is, if you were to speak with me 6 months from now or 6 months ago, I would say something very different. And I think it's important to kind of to say. And we've ebbed and flowed between more independent teams working on individual brands without any need to switch context, and smaller teams working centrally on the things that everyone has to use, like pharmacy or medical groups and so on, to more central and larger teams working centrally so we can share knowledge and share learnings and create that fluidity that really sparks innovation. And today we have I think a really interesting mix. So we have dedicated teams with leaders for each of the brands they tend to be pretty tight in size. So typically sub 30 people for the individual teams. And so we have 4 brands. And so if you just did the math there, about 100 to 120 people are going to be independent just within their business. And then the rest and the majority of the company works centrally. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't people in those central organizations who only focus on one of our offerings, but they operate centrally. And this really helps for both career pathing and growth opportunities, but also the ability for someone to work across the offerings and take learnings from one to the next so that we can, if we learn something from code and our patients for code that would be relevant for Picnic, we want to be able to seamlessly and quickly implement that, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to think about how that is also evolving, right? As you both the platform and the offerings and the customer experience itself is. So I appreciate you shedding some light on that for us. Changing gears a little bit, I wanted to get your thoughts on the overall kind of explosion, right, of telehealth in general, digital health in recent years. The kind of direct-to-consumer model has been very powerful in destigmatizing certain conditions and increasing access and hopefully, right, and improving outcomes as well. But then you get kind of the other side where it's like, are there drawbacks related to self-diagnosis or certain situations where people should be seeking out care in person? How do you think about the pros and cons on that front?
Great question. So I think, look, by and large, the boom in digital health is incredibly impactful for patients, and certainly a net positive. I think in any industry where there's something new, there's always going to be folks who are doing better jobs or worse jobs in it. I think as it comes back to the patient, though, early on, just creating more options for patients to get access to healthcare is a good thing, right? I think you said you're in Pennsylvania. I'm in New York. We're in or near major cities, and so we're fortunate that we're fortunate there are physicians and care nearby. In many places in the country, there aren't physically there. 2, I'm incredibly fortunate to have the ability to have insurance and afford that care. Many people in the country aren't. And so when you think about the offerings, there's so much room for the ability to provide more access to care and to treatment. I think what you're seeing, though, and what I'm personally excited about is that's not enough. And people are realizing that, and you need to go beyond that. When we build our offerings, we say we're not trying to provide access to healthcare actually anymore. Like, that's not enough. We want to say we want to provide access to a better health outcome. And that's the mantra and the mindset that we take. And, it's not about getting a medication delivered or seeing a doctor online. It's about how do those things fit together to drive to a better health outcome for a patient? How do they come together, and how does digital health and technology drive down the cost to deliver those better outcomes? How does it drive up the actual experience? I started this by saying a few people would describe their healthcare experiences as enjoyable. And, I think the net promoter score in the average healthcare experience is in the single digits, which is, on a scale from negative 100 to 100, 100 being the best, like being in the single digits is awful. And, we're seeing ourselves that we can do that. So I'll use Cove as a quick example here, to the point around better serving patients. First and foremost, our patients coming in have often had healthcare experiences for their migraine. I told you they're deeply suffering, oftentimes for years, and the system, frankly, has failed them. More often than not, they're not able to see a specialist. Part of that is because there's just not enough out there. So there's 40 million people in the United States who suffer from migraine. There's about 500 physicians who are headache specialists. You can't there's no way to provide access to that type of care without using some form of technology or a different way to help patients get that specialist level care. And so patients are coming in, they're deeply frustrated, they're suffering. If you have 9 or more migraine a month, and many of our patients are more than half of the month have a migraine. You can't live easily that way, or some people you just can't live that way. That's terrible. And so we're able to create the specialist level telemedicine experience, recommend them, work with using our data, working with what they provide their physician, and working with their physician. They get a personalized plan. That's, mix of, sometimes it's a medication, sometimes it's a coaching, digital therapeutic coaching, sometimes it's a supplement, it's a combination, whatever it may be. But then we provide them with this ongoing continuous access to their physician, to their care team, migraine tracking tools, and we work with them to help them get to a better outcome. And what's really powerful is that we're showing for patients who are with us, after 3 to 6 months, about 80% of patients experience reduction in migraine severity, about a third reduction in migraine days per month. So if you can, get 4, 5, 6 days of your month back, and when you even have a migraine, it's less severe, that's life changing. And so we're reducing ER visits and these other things. And so when I think about the ability for digital health to help patients, and the last one, which is going back to the NPS score, we have roughly an 80 NPS, and we're doing that at scale. If you think about that for a second, being able to deliver incredibly enjoyable patient experiences at significantly lower prices that actually deliver a better health outcome. And we can do that for tens or hundreds of thousands of patients already, and we'll be doing it for millions of patients soon. There's nothing like that. And that's the promise and the potential of digital health, but it hasn't delivered on that just yet. But we're starting to see that happening, and it's really powerful and exciting.
Yeah, I think you paint you use the word powerful. I'll echo that picture of what can be when it comes to the opportunity and how we're going about it in the digital health space. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on, when we think about the different companies that have emerged in this space, in addition to 30 Madison, you have like the Hims of the world and Row, and even maybe like a Redesign Health, which is more of like the venture studio model that we talked about. And then the consolidation, the M&A, even to your point, 30 Madison and Nurx, the women's kind of digital health company announcing the merger there. How do you see it playing out in terms of the platforms, the models, the competitors, the M&A, all the pieces that go into that? Do you have a sense of where that's going, or how you'd like to see it play out?
Yeah. So, I think the promise of digital health has yet to be realized. And the promise of it is that we can deliver better patient experiences, that we can put more control into the patient's hands, that we can deliver better outcomes, more access to better outcomes to more people. at scale, and that we can do it more affordably and cut costs, not just from a patient, more importantly, but actually cut costs from the system, unnecessary costs from the healthcare system. Um, I think what's you're seeing is that it's gone in waves, right? You start with, I think, telemedicine or digital health 1.0 was kind of like this, just instead of me talking with you, I'd be talking with a doctor, right? Like, it's like, how do we just put the doctor visit on the internet? And it was typically more for like an urgent care setting or with your existing physician, and you really want to think about it, like, could have just been a phone call back in the day. It was a similar type of experience. But that was that first wave. And you're starting to see shifts happening, and part of this is through consolidation and M&A. Part of this is just through patient comfort and technology. Like, why now? You have hundreds of millions of people who have experienced telemedicine for the first time and realized and not just patients, but tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of physicians and care providers. And so you're starting to see a at least understanding of it. You don't have to tell my parents, like, what is telemedicine anymore? Like, they know. And that's really powerful when you think about the shift that you're starting to see. So then you're starting to see now people saying, well, what if this was a starting point? And so there's so much investment in virtual urgent care offerings and now virtual primary care offerings. We're really excited because what we really believe we're building is virtual specialists, right? Virtual specialty care. And when you look at the costs in the healthcare system and patients there, the majority of costs are in treating chronic conditions and for specialists. And also that's where the majority of the shortage is in terms of providers. And so as we grow and get to scale, and frankly, with our combination with Nurx, when it closes, if we think that scale means serving patients, right? And how many patients can we impact to drive change in healthcare? Well, there's many things that are exciting about our combination with Nurx, but I think one of the most exciting things is that on day one, we'll be the largest player in our space by patient count. We will serve more patients, 750,000 patients, than anyone else. And, pretty soon 1 million. And that in healthcare is real scale. And that allows you to really, I think a lot of the times it's really hard to quote unquote transform an industry when you're small, but even when you get to a large scale, it's hard to transform an industry if you're either only working inside the system or only working outside the system. And I think something for us that we're excited about is that we work and serve patients directly, but we also work with payers. We work with providers. We work with employers. We work with others within the healthcare system and bring them into our model. And we found a way to do that to better serve patients. And I think that's when the promise of digital health will hopefully be delivered in the future, is when we're delivering on those three things I said earlier, which is better patient experiences and more control in the patient's hands. But that's not enough. You got to also deliver better outcomes, and you got to do it in a way that reduces costs in the system and works and brings the system forward.
For sure. Yeah. And I think in wrapping up, maybe one more question for you looking ahead. I think it was last summer, you guys raised like $140 million round, valued at, well over $1 billion at this point. And of course, talking about both the vision, the opportunity, but also the mission to improve access and bring costs down and serve more people ultimately. As you think about, continuing to navigate that course, is there anything on the roadmap or anything that you're excited about we should be on the lookout for looking ahead here?
Well, we did just announce a pretty transformational deal and merging with Nurx. And so, when that closes and we can really start to work together, I'm really excited about what that's going to mean for patients. I'm really excited for what that level of scale can mean in terms of how we better serve patients, how we deliver the better outcomes to them. And then the other piece is that, as I said earlier, we are already on a path where we want to have at least one offering for everyone in our country in the next couple of years. And so we also expect to introduce additional brands and offering targeting other chronic conditions, and really trying to have that reach in terms of what we can do to serve patients, but also continue to deliver on that promise of delivering better outcomes and experiences for patients at scale within chronic condition areas.
Yeah, and I guess to that end, what's the we'll get you out of here on this. What's the best way for people to learn more or engage with the different brands or platform in general? Where would you point them?
Yeah, so I mean, we list all of our offerings on 30madison.com. But if you have if you're suffering from hair loss and you want men's hair loss services, you can go to keeps.com. Migraine is withcove.com. GI is evens.com, and allergy is picnicallergy.com.
Fantastic. Steve, thanks so much for joining us today. It was great learning more about everything that you have going on, and I'm very excited to share the conversation.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.